and welcome to Default Assault, where we take on everything by default. And tonight we'll be taking on remakes. Remakes. They're everywhere, and they're driving me a little nuts. So before we begin, here's our wonderful co-host, Mr. Kyle Nash, to kind of bring me back down to earth. How's it going, Kyle?
Bring you down to earth? No, getting nuts as hell. It's messed up. It's a problem.
Son of a bitch, I'm doomed.
We're doomed.
I mean, remakes are nothing new in the world of cinema. They've existed since the time of cinema's birth. But by God, over the last really a couple decades, they've just been ramped up. And of course, remake got to a point where the very word remake was anathema to one's ears and perception. It's gotten to the point where the word just got so bad, had such a bad connotation to it that they decided to let's change it up. Starting with Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes, which just saying that makes me want to half vomit. Suddenly the term became reimagining, and then it became reboot. Even though most people that actually say or use the word reboot do not necessarily know what the reboot means.
Here's the thing about this concept of the remake. I can see how early in its inception, it would be extremely noble a task. All right. In its original form, cinema was silent. And then they started putting sound in movies. Demos, your favorite silent movie at the time, it would make sense. You're like, damn it. I wonder what this Charlie Chaplin movie would be like if it had actual dialogue. And it could have blown your effing mind.
Wizard of Oz was a sound remake.
Okay, perfect. And hell, that's a cult classic. Even though it failed initially, air quotes, failed initially at its time, it's something that carries on and has stood more than a half century in itself being an air quotes noble remake. And you can see how something that was once noble now has been bastardized into the plague of the modern cinema industry.
Very well said. So tonight we'll be kind of exploring some of these remakes. Now, we're not really going to be focusing on best remakes ever, worst remakes ever. Some of them are probably going to come up. But yeah, those lists are done to death. You can find them online, whatever. Tonight we're actually really going to ask the question, when is it a good time to remake a movie? Or when is it appropriate to remake a movie? We're not going to be so much focused on real, actual reboots. And the fact that we live in a society where the TV show Reboot is getting a reboot, well, my mind has exploded.
Wait a minute. There's actually a TV show called Reboot?
Yes, it was actually one of the earliest CG animated cartoons, ran for a couple seasons, and they're rebooting it now. There's going to be a reboot.
Quit. Got this. I'm out.
And so endeth Default Assault. I will be remaking it with a word that's probably not going to get me banned from YouTube. So let's back up here and really ask the question, why do these remakes happen? And I think the answer is pretty simple. Money, Lebowski. It's why remake and create a new property when you can remake, let's use the Pink Panther as an example, or RoboCop, or Total Recall. Half the marketing is done for you. It is the classic lazy move.
Safe is what I prefer over lazy, Demos, because in truth, and this is more the state of the industry.
So the real question that people have is, especially the question of why these remakes happen. Okay, what is the ideal type of movie that deserves a remake? And most people say bad movies that had intriguing premises that failed, that deserve to have a remake to take advantage of the missed opportunity, more or less. But why doesn't that happen? Because of that same association. Nobody is gonna really want to go see and pay money to something that has already failed before.
I would argue that the best movies that are remade are the missed opportunities. Perhaps they take, for example, a movie we've talked about on this channel in the past that is really an underrated gem without a clue, where they explore the premise of Holmes possibly being merely an actor, a fraud, and the real genius being one Dr. Watson. Probably wasn't acclaimed, air quotes, to the extent that you and I appreciated that film. But that sounds like the kind of thing that could have been done better to be amazeballs, as the kids say, right? That's the kind of movie that should be remade. You know, you and I, before the show went on the air, cited Disney's sci-fi movie that had a major self-identification problem in The Black Hole. There was so much there that was amazing. Some of the characters, I personally love the robots. The music in it was vice tight, and it was complete trashola. And in a world where, you know, space movies, air quotes, of that sort can be, in fact, amazing, that's one where you take a shot. You take the missed opportunities and fulfill their destiny. That is fodder for the proper remake.
Which is funny because, as I mentioned in that conversation, there are plans on the table of remaking Black Hole from the same creators as Tron Legacy. So before we answer the question of when a film should be remade, let's answer the question of when a film should not. And there are many ways you can look at it. Is it when a film becomes too iconic that it should not be remade? That's one aspect you can look at it. I mean, how accepting would you be of a remake of, let's say, Mary Poppins, or The Sound of Music, or The Godfather? Exactly. These films are very iconic. They also, all three of them happen to share something that kind of makes them timeless, in the fact that these are all period films. In the fact that they can be lifted and shown at any particular point in time. Mary Poppins takes place in 1910. If you're going to remake it right now, honestly, the only thing that today we may have going for it are the special effects.
Or I would even say instances where what they did special effects wise held up so well, there's no reason to continue to move it forward, right? You know, we cited, for example, Close Encounters of the Third Kind as one of our required readings. That is among the ones that should not be remade. A, you're not going to get it right. You're not going to find the right talent level. And in this day and age, the formula for cinema will not allow the subtlety in the execution to exist. It is just not a thing. Two, here's the other thing, Demos. Sometimes you have somebody that's just perfect for the part, and sometimes the state of the world at the time it existed is perfect for it to fit. Do not remake Die Hard. Why? Terrorists in this day and age are a wildly confusing and legitimately scary factor to the average American. Now, back in the 80s, terrorists were still scary. Generally speaking, Americans didn't know what they were for the most part because it wasn't affecting them directly. I'm not trying to tell you that's how it should be. I'm trying to tell you that's just what it was. And so for Bruce Willis to encounter terrorists, they're not criminals. No, they're more tricky than that. But this everyman's going to go in there. This guy who made you laugh on Moonlighting is going to kick the shit out of these cats. No one expected Bruce Willis to be an action star. That's why the movie played. And oh, by the way, at the end of the day, the twist is they're not really effing terrorists. They're just complicated bank robbers. That damn sure.
Spoiler alert.
Work today. Oh yeah, spoilers, bitches. Spoiler.
Well, here's the thing, and I'm glad you brought up Die Hard because that was the example I was actually just about to use. So thank you. Congratulations. You have prescient power, my friend. Here's the reason why Die Hard shouldn't be remade, beyond the fact that it's in its own right, it's an iconic film. But really, what separates Die Hard, right, is its execution. Its story is not a unique story. It's a man trapped in an enclosed building that has to fight his way out, faces adversity. One man alone against the behemoth. Heck, there was an episode of Remington Steele, and if you're not familiar with what Remington Steele is, it's a early 1980s Pierce Brosnan detective show. There was an episode that was Die Hard. It was Pierce Brosnan was stuck in a building in LA, and an armed group comes in and takes over the building, and he has to take them down. It's not a unique story. You can adapt that kind of idea and make it original, make it its own thing. You don't have to slap the name Die Hard on it. But why would you want to? Because the money. So another reason I have, and this is actually more of a caution whenever you remake a film, is if you're gonna do a remake, especially of a film that's gritty or hard R, ramp up, don't ramp down. If you're gonna take a film like RoboCop, a film that by a hair's edge was able to get away with an R instead of an X or an NC-17,
right?
Don't remake it as a PG-13 piece of shit.
Yes, and like, if you're like Demos here, he could not record this video, let those words play, and then do a version where he bleeps himself out. That couldn't happen. No, obviously that's a great point by you. You're committed at that point to match the tone, if it is in fact a remake, because that's all you are doomed to be compared in this day and age. Simply put,
why would I want to watch the TV edit? Yippee-ki-yay, Mr. Falcon version of RoboCop when I can watch a goddamn real thing.
Or my favorite one from Major League, where it goes from strike this motherfucker out to strike this guy out. Like, literally, the edit is that bad.
Higgidus figidus, Mickey Mouse. I'm tired of this.
Monkey.
A term I wanna inject here, and maybe it'll get picked up by the psyche at large. Who knows? But it's almost as if instead of an intellectual property, they mortgage it and take on intellectual debt and collect money from it in order to project this movie into the lexicon, the mainstream, right? And their ability to pay back that intellectual debt, to not tarnish the name that they just borrowed, or I should say exploited, rather. The success of the movie has to be great for them to repay the intellectual debt in question, right?
Let's move into the positive section. When is it okay to remake a movie? Now, we've touched upon a couple of things already. If it's a movie, maybe not even necessarily a bad movie, but a film that had promise. If it has that type of promise, right, it has a good concept, if it has something to build upon, and that's a key word, build upon, that's an ideal time to remake a property.
I think in one such instance, the good example is Ocean's 11. It's the concept of the missed opportunity. It's the concept of you built upon it by, instead of it being members of the Rat Pack, you took elite actors of the time that even span generations, by the way, going old school with Carl Reiner, and then bringing in, members of the air quotes newer school, going all the way down to Matt Damon. And then there's two instances, right? The missed opportunity thematically or stylistically, or the technological limitation, like we cited earlier on with silent movies being remade with the sound, with talkies, right?
Ocean's 11, similar to the remake of the Thomas Crown Affair. Both great movies, but also wildly different from the original.
Right. Yeah. No, I remember that the later version is certainly way different than the Rat Pack version. Right.
Mm-hmm. So it's very different. It used a premise as a jumping off point as well, but it went into a completely different direction. And the Thomas Crown Affair, in all honesty, I don't think, I have trouble comparing it. Funny enough, I have trouble comparing that to the original film. The original film is probably superior. Steve McQueen, Faye Dunaway. It's Norman Jewison, I believe, directed it. Fantastic film. Far more serious. Steve McQueen was robbing banks. In fact, he was actually hiring bank robbers to rob banks, so he was sitting back. He was a master planner. In Thomas Crown Affair, it's art theft. and Pierce Brosnan is getting his own hands dirty. The basic premise is the romance, the romantic aspect. That's similar, but also in kind of a way that foreign films to American films, a lot of times you get the American ending versus the European ending. Thomas Crown Affair has a far, far happier ending than the original film, which was much true in the spirit of that film and much truer in the spirit of the original Ocean's 11 film. But here's the question. When is it okay to remake an iconic film?
No.
Well, here's the thing. Steven Spielberg is, after he makes the next Indiana Jones film, wants to remake a Best Picture winner. He wants to remake West Side Story.
No.
But here's the dilemma. Should we view film as something that's caught in time? It's been done. It should never be redone. Or should it be addressed like a stage play? Shakespeare, how many times has it been redone? Should we keep actors and directors and artists from being able to adapt and put their own stamp on these famous properties?
I don't think that's even remotely the same, and let me tell you why. How many artists have painted the Mona Lisa? You don't see the others at the museum. It belongs in a museum. No, only one of them does. Okay? What's different about Shakespeare, my friend, is twofold. I find it ironic that Shakespeare is not only what's used to introduce new actors into what certain forms of acting are. It's so iconic that it's teaching material, that it's stuff that the common person, if they really want to truly be drawn to theater, has to be demonstrated that way.
But you can't limit your argument to Shakespeare. I'm talking stage plays as a whole there have been different versions of different productions going throughout the centuries.
Okay, I'm building on that. Mm-hmm. Now, and well, the other thing about stage plays as well is and I am particular to Shakespeare with the concept of the teaching of the craft, right? And perhaps there are some instances now where even more modern productions, Porgy and Bess, things like that, are making its way into that teaching concept. At its time, I'm not sure how many productions were prominent surrounding the manner of story that Porgy and Bess was, right? But also with the concept of the stage play, it exists in a different world where town criers and minstrels were the way news and folklore were preserved. The way that stage plays have to be done is how they have to preserve that craft. If I take a video of a stage play, it is not the stage play experience. That being said, Demos, because cinema in its very form is a recorded experience, it in itself is a moment in time. Much like a painting is executed through a recorded medium. Yes, in fact, folks, graphical writing and painting and putting something on paper is a record. Art is a prettier record of what's going on.
Well, you see, I find it really funny that in your argument you find the intersection between the painting or the photograph, the still life, with the performance. It meets in the middle, and it creates the gray area that we know as film.
This in itself could be its own episode, but I don't exactly agree with that. At the end of the day, the concept is the stage play is in fact a performance, but at the end of the day, it is not recorded. If I go to the matinee and then I return that evening for the night show, it will be in fact a unique experience. Sure, the songs will be the same. Sure, a lot of the choreography will be the same, but it will not be the same. Something will be different.
Chicago with Wardrobe Malfunction is far, far more exciting.
That in itself is a fantastic concept to demonstrate my point through hyperbole. But what I'm trying to say is this: it is not recorded, okay, in the traditional sense. It is not stored to paper or film or digital medium to be stored in a place in time as a, air quotes, snapshot of those moments.
In many ways, I agree with you. Personally speaking, when it comes down to the remake, I have two ways of thinking about it. A, you take something like The Wizard of Oz, right? One of the most iconic films, arguably the most iconic film. Nothing can supersede it. But it's been remade many times. The Wiz with Michael Jackson is probably one of the most famous versions. Terrible version, in my opinion. But it tried something radically different. It was its own thing. Inarguably, it was its own thing. Its existence does not supersede the original.
An homage to the art.
Exactly. I don't have a problem so much. I mean, even had a different title. I don't have a problem so much with that type of approach. If Spielberg were to remake West Side Story and put it in a contemporary setting, for instance, I don't think that'd be a very good film, honestly, but it could be something different. At least you're trying to do something new with it. As long as it's not done at the expense of that original film, I can tolerate it. It doesn't enthrall me, especially when the market is so saturated with these types of remakes. If anything, it is making me ache so much more so for something. Just give me something else.
If you are cocky enough to think you can build on Die Hard, if you're cocky enough to think that you can redo Vito Corleone, you better have the britches and ability. Moreover, you better have an actor with the britches and ability to pull that shit off.
I think there are some instances where a film is way too iconic that even the approach of a remake is anathema. Especially, like I said before, it's when it comes to a film that is set in a particular time that can be lifted as a whole and be watched today without making any changes, there's no reason it should be remade.
I can already tell you, for example, why West Side Story already has something you have to account for. How's it go? I feel pretty, oh so pretty. I feel pretty and witty and what? You can't even use that word the same way anymore, Chief. I'm just saying.
Well, they're going to be changing it to be more inclusive.
Oh. Okay, it's not West Coast Story that takes place in San Francisco. and
that's how you're going to remake it.
Oh, Jesus.
West Coast Story.
What can I say except you're welcome? We're going to go to the Pacific. I got to throw Maui in there. I'm just saying.
Well, on that note, what do you guys think? When should a film be remade? Or can iconic films be touched? Can they be remade? And if so, under what kind of circumstances? And I know Kyle and I went back and forth. And really, when it comes down to it, there is no definitive answer except for ours. But nevertheless, let us know in the comments below. Make sure to like, subscribe, turn on those notifications, and find me on Hilarity by Default.com for weekly movie reviews, other fun stuff. Follow me on Twitter at Default Hilarity, on Facebook, Hilarity by Default. Also on Hilarity by Default, our man Kyle has started a series.
That's right. It's a sports fan's guide to nerd culture. We already have our opening installment in play with why Wolverine is like the NFL quarterback Tom Brady. And by the time this episode is released, we would have dropped installment number 2, why Peyton Manning is like Indiana Jones. One I know that Demos is personally excited for. He's going to learn more about Peyton Manning thanks to this article than ever before. And more to come after that. There might be a slight break later in March because I will be personally in place to observe UCF's Pro Day to try and see Mike Hughes improve his 40 time and all that other kind of happy stuff that you'll also find on NGSesports.com. And of course, you can find me on Twitter at the SOTG and of course on Facebook as the Student of the Game.
Sounds great. And make sure to check out Default Assault every Thursday where life is hilarious by default.